Hello, one and all, and welcome to episode 63 of Bleeding Your College's baseball podcast, Opposite Field. I am your host, Trevor, joined as always by Colin. How are you doing this fine evening, my friend?
Doing good. Doing good.
And over the years, we have kind of been labeled we're a bit of negative Nazis when it comes to this sport. And I feel that's kind of just like the hardened nature of a baseball fan. You always kind of try to like find those rough edges more than trying to deal with things because that's just what we're given a lot of times.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a lot of things to bitch about, and there's times that you want to be positive where you kind of just talk yourself out of it more than anything. So tonight we're going to try to find, and as you'll see by the name of it, we're going to find that light at the end of the tunnel, because the worst thing about being a sports fan is rooting for a team that stinks. And,
Yep.
and yeah, we've all been on that end. I've been there for the suck for luck season, and if you embrace it, it can kind of be fun. But in baseball, a lot of times there's times where you see your team trying to put themselves through those paces, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
Well, baseball is
yeah,
it's just too long of a sport for you to be like, okay, all right, well, it's fun. We're having fun, and then you're in July and you're like, God, just end.
I'm done with this.
Also, we should preference it by saying we originally wanted to do a show about how the White Sox are garbage, but we're gonna change it around.
Yeah, that's the thing. We saw a negative road, and we jutted off an exit, and we were going to and we're gonna be like, hey, you know what, White Sox fans, I know you don't got much hope in your heart, but we're gonna try to give you a roadmap to keeping your sanity together, because we're gonna see how the teams at the bottom of the league right now can emulate the model of the Baltimore Orioles
Yes.
to bring themselves back to relevancy. That's kind of what we're going to talk about this evening.
Yeah.
How it if you can endure some really rough times and have faith in your front office, in your scouting department, to go get things right on that end, and have, once again, put a lot of faith out there in your ownership to go make the trades when the pieces are together.
Yeah.
Because if you jump the gun and you go too early, you're going to have guys that aren't ready playing with guys that don't want to play with people who aren't ready.
Right.
So you kind of got to find that balance. And that's kind of what we're going to try to do this evening, is find that balance for a couple teams that are in the doldrums right now and are either going to try to work their way back up, or we're looking a couple years into the future to see how certain teams could do as such. So I will leave it to you. Where do you want to start? Because if we're looking at just the Orioles, and everybody knows how just absolutely nasty this roster has become.
Yeah.
But for those who are uninitiated, this did not come without sacrifice.
Oh yeah.
Because all right, I will let you go after this, but I'm going to read out the Baltimore Orioles records from 2017 to 2021.
Yeah, please.
It started off with a respectable but still last place, 75 and 87 in 2017. A less than respectable but still last place, 47 and 115 in 2018. In 2019, it was yet another 100 loss season, 54 and 108. COVID brought them up to 4th place in the division at 25-35 in 2020 before finishing with yet another 100-loss season, 52-110 in 2021. But what did those horrific years net the Orioles? The first round picks in the subsequent years, so 2018 to 2022, were Grayson Rodriguez, one of their top pitchers, injury bug aside, all that, and so on and so forth. Adley Rushman, their talismanic catcher.
Yep.
Esten Kjerstad, who is going to probably end up a cornerstone of their outfield. Colton Cowser, who could either be in the infield or outfield, depending on where they find the spot for him. And Jackson Holliday, Matt Holliday's kid, who will probably be one of their superstars for the future. They already called him up once. He may be back by the end of this year and will probably be a staple of that team for the next decade.
Yes. And also, we should add, because I think it's important within this discussion, to add that one of the reasons, well, I think the key word that we should say should be patient, because the Orioles did not give up on any of these guys. They weren't trade baits for anybody that came into Baltimore to be a part of a 100-loss team. They kept these guys in the minors. They developed them for these last few years, and now we're looking at a team that, if you ask, you know, a lot of baseball insiders would say that they have as better shot as anyone to win the World Series.
Yeah, and all the while they've cultivated a culture that is conducive to guys like Corbin Burns being okay with being traded there,
So
and guys
actually,
willing to sign there.
so here's my question to you: without this roster, there's no way a guy like Corbin Burns ends up on this team.
No, without this promise and the youth, I don't think so, because you look at Milwaukee with where they are in the NL Central.
Mhm.
It's not as if he was leaving a sinking ship.
No, they're a very good team.
But I think he saw that the Milwaukee era of like him, Woodruff,
Yeah, it's over.
Peralta, like Yelich and Adames, all those guys, that had kind of like run its course, where there was no upward trajectory.
Yeah.
They may win the division this year, but the Brewers aren't going to go win the World Series.
No.
At least from ours and probably his perspective, because if you are, because it's not like he's going to a team like the Yankees or the Dodgers where they're going to throw a disgusting extension at him after making that trade. It's kind of similar situations. So I think from him, he's going, I know that I'm making this move, which may seem lateral in terms of where the two teams are in the standings, but I think that in the end, me moving here is giving me a better chance to win. And while Milwaukee was looking more at like picking from which we will probably cover several times over the course of the season, an incredibly deep Baltimore farm system. They wanted to pick from that. They also probably knew that if this kind of era of what they have is getting phased out, they need to restock the shelves. So when things come back around and they got that next crop of players,
Yeah.
they need to be prepared for it as well.
And on the other side of that, uh, Baltimore, they're in a position where Corbin Burns would be a player that 5, 10 years ago, he'd be going to the Yankees, he'd be going to the Dodgers, he'd be going to the Red Sox. So for the Orioles to have built this team and for the front office to be like, we're in a really good position to make this kind of move right now that we would not have been able to make 4 years ago. And I think what that says to me is not just that they're a great young team, but I think that Baltimore has now become a destination place for a lot of free agents in the coming years to want to play with these young guys, to be part of that core, especially if they go out and win a World Series within the next 3 years and you want to try to build a dynasty in Baltimore. Um, they now have the tools and are set up to do so if they want to, because, like you said, their farm system's deep. If they feel like they need a another power left-handed hitter, which who could hit 40 home runs a year, or they need another ace, or they need someone in the back of that bullpen to just kind of help. They now are in a position to get that done, where that wouldn't even be thinkable a couple years ago.
Yeah.
It's weird because if you think about it, the Rays have been good because they built a farm system that was so good. But what the Rays never did, in my eyes, is go out and get that Corbin Burns to help them.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's
And in fact, they did the opposite with letting Blake Snell go, letting Tyler Glasnow go, not adding another pitcher to build some kind of like 5-man rotation in that AL East that, you don't want to face night after night. They just stuck with their young guys and said, let's just keep bringing them up. We're very successful. We're going to roll this out. And now look at this. You mentioned the phrase come back around. I think it's come back around on Tampa.
yeah. And Tampa and Houston were kind of like the OGs of
Yeah.
the build through the draft, stink for 4 or 5 years, and put together those teams that. And it's not necessarily where you just like Tampa was building through the draft entirely when you got guys like David Price.
And they were successful.
Yeah, and they had that run, and I'm not saying that Tampa is completely. I think they've missed their window in
Yeah,
terms of
that's yeah.
what their system was going to produce in terms of a potential title or a potential like 4-year run where they're in the World Series like 2 or 3 times.
Right.
I think that has passed.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Baltimore kind of is on that upward slope right now. And I think they have more of a chance of maintaining, whereas Tampa's like, oh, we hit this thing, but now we don't want to pay these 4 guys. So we're going to let them go. Like going back towards like the Matt Garzas of the world. There was
Yeah.
guys that were just like, we can't.
The James Shields.
James Shields. There was all these guys that came up were either high level or like mid level draft picks that were just cultivated, and now they're and and this may be a topic for another day where we're talking about how the analytics of
Yeah.
openers and shit like that have really poisoned the well a bit and taken teams where like, oh, we have this thing that works kind of well and we're going to run into the ground, and it just ends up kind of being the wildcat of baseball. But nope, we're not going to delve into the negative. We're going to keep our spirits high.
And like Tampa, the thing about Tampa is, I still think that they're still going to be around. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to be the basement dwellers that they were 30 years ago. I still think they're going to be around because they got a good farm system. They got a lot of good
Yeah,
young players. However, unlike Baltimore, I think that they're just going to be a dog chasing its tail because they're going to draft these guys. They're going to come up. They're going to be successful. They're not going to go any further than maybe, you know, a uh, ALCS maybe every once in a
and then they're
while,
gonna ship them
and
out.
then go
Yep.
back and then go back down. Well, I think Baltimore is in a position to build upon what they have and try to make a dynasty for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. And the farm
Yeah.
system's that deep. And on the other end of that spectrum, it's Toronto, who thought basically they're just going to buy the players that they want. And I don't know. I feel like Toronto has kind of given up on their farm system and would rather go out and get a George Springer to build their team than to try to develop. Or maybe they just don't have good scouting anymore. I don't know. They're kind of an anomaly in that
Yeah,
division.
they are weird. They are weird.
So, but yeah, so I think the purpose that we're trying to make is, or the point was the next team to do that. And obviously, it's not going to happen now, but it's going to, it's not going to happen next year. But we're looking future. We're looking 5 years down the road.
Yeah. So it's something where you kind of have to endure that rough patch,
Yeah.
and you kind of got to see the forest through the trees. And I think in terms of short term, there's a couple teams that we're looking at that may be kind of
Almost
in
there.
that ballpark this year, but
Yeah.
there are also some that are at the doldrums of the league right now that you can kind of try to paint that picture that there is something to look forward to.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the short term teams because there's a couple of surprises from the season, and we painted a couple. We talked about a couple of them,
Yeah.
but I think the biggest uh, the nice canvas to paint on for this season so far has been the AL Central because you have the a bunch of teams that are playing incredibly well.
Yep.
You have the team that's in fourth place on a 10-game winning streak.
Yep.
And you have the Royals who you picked to be really good coming into this year, kind of going on that trajectory where they've had a bunch of guys where they built through the draft and they locked up some of those guys
Their face. Yeah.
very early. Bobby
Yep.
Witt being the biggest one.
Yep.
I think the Royals are a team that are I'd say they're on the doorstep. I don't think they're ready for prime time yet, but they seem to be
There.
in that ballpark. And the same with the Guardians. They're a team that everybody kind of like wrote off this year, and us included.
Us included.
Especially when Shane Bieber went down, you're just going, all right, they'll be able to pitch because they got a lot of young live arms like Logan Allen, Tristan McKenzie, Tanner Bibby. You got guys that can go out there and can give you innings, but we kind of wrote off their offense as dead.
Yes.
So what have you seen from the Guardians that has impressed you through these first like month of the season to be like, hey, they are the behind the Orioles, the second best offense in the American League. How are they pulling it off?
Well, I just want to start by saying that the irony of this discussion when we were doing our predictions and saying that this was just going to be a absolute dogfight to see who can get over 500 in the playoffs.
Yeah.
This you look at this division, and with the outlier obviously being the White Sox, and we're not going to talk about the White Sox. But I just want to read you.
We'll gloss over them briefly, but they are
Yeah,
not as part of the team because
I just want to
spoiler alert.
read you the standings currently as of today. The Guardians are in first place at 20-10, and just to tell everyone, they have the second best record in all of baseball by 1 game to the Atlanta Braves. Okay, then you have the Kansas City Royals at 19-13. And you said that you don't think they're ready for prime time, but they are maintaining for a quarter of the season with 19 wins. Then you have a team that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So spoiler alert: the Detroit Tigers with 18 wins. 18 wins is amazing for a team that we'll tell you why it's amazing. And then your pick for this division winner, the Minnesota Twins, who are in fifth place with fourth place with 17 wins. That's
But
incredible.
they're on a 10-game winning streak.
And on a 10-game winning streak. That's incredible for this division. For a division that we were saying is the worst division of professional sports.
was gonna be hot garbage.
Yeah.
And that shows you how much. A lot of time that just shows you how much like preseason picks and punditry. You're kind of just throwing darts at the board, and you're trying to look at things on paper, and it doesn't always come to pass because there's lots of mitigating factors, and the way that all four of these teams have kind of gone about their business especially in like the past 10 days, because I'd say all of these teams that we're talking about right now had their little rough patches in the early start of the season, but then they've all kind of course corrected simultaneously.
Well,
and even the White Sox won 3 games in a row, and you're like, oh, so maybe they're not as crap as we thought we were, which kind of caused our pivot a little bit. When they were like 3-22, you're like, all right, we're just going to talk about how much the White Sox suck. And we had a bunch of puns ready. It was going to be great. But then, yeah, you kind of look at it through a different lens, and you're like, yeah, oh my God, this division's really fucking stacked.
It's incredible because, I mean, just to put this in perspective, taking out the White Sox, because that brings them down a little bit, but all four of these teams, or the division as a whole, has a better winning percentage than the American League East, who has the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, the Orioles, who we are saying is the best team, Tampa and Toronto. And this team, or this division, has the best winning percentage in the AL.
Yeah, if you look at the top 4.
Yeah, the top 4.
Yeah,
and obviously that White Sox,
you take
it's going to
Tampa
bring
out
you down.
and you take the White Sox out. And yeah, it's a bit of picking and choosing what you're looking at. But if you're looking in terms of the strength from that top 4, because Toronto is I'd say a significant distance from Boston, just from a pitching perspective.
Yeah.
At this point of the season, there's a drop off where Toronto has maybe 1.5 guys that they can rely on.
Yeah.
Where if you go through the pitching in the Central, every team has like 2 guys that in their turn of the rotation, you're going, yeah, this could be a game that we could win.
And it's insane to me because it makes it exciting, you know?
Yeah.
Because if you want to be a real baseball fan, that is a race to keep an eye on. Because with the new wild card spread, we might have to change and say 3 teams out of the AL Central are going to make the playoffs.
It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Because I don't know, because you said it, you mentioned it, and I'm kind of almost there, but I'm pretty sure if Toronto can't get it together, they're going to be sellers at the trade deadline.
Yeah, my thing with yeah, but my thing with Toronto is I think they're too stubborn for their own good. I
Yeah,
think they're gonna see that they're within striking distance because they can still hit and they will do enough to kind of be within 2 or 3 games of that final wild card heading into the final month,
yeah.
and they'll
But it's
go
all gonna,
for
but,
it.
but it's all gonna come down to record. I mean, if the AL Central team continue the trajectory and all stay within one another, they might not. The Blue Jays might not have a good enough record to even make a wild card.
Yeah, and it's I just yeah, you'd like to think that these teams have enough awareness, but
Yeah,
we've seen on too many occasions that they very much don't.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't want to go out on the limb and say that we're going to have 2 or 3 teams from the Central, but I have more faith about when there's kind of a regression to the mean where you're going to have Toronto playing a little better, you're going to have Tampa playing a little better, and you're going to have teams like Cleveland and Kansas City playing a little worse. I still think that those teams, and we're going to talk about Detroit in a second. There's enough there where you have guys in big spots that there's no fear anymore.
yeah,
There's a big game between like the Tigers and the Yankees in August. They're not going to be going in there thinking they're going to get swept. They're
right.
going to go in there thinking that they can go hold their own and do some damage and force Toronto and Tampa to go and have to go win a big series away from home. It's a good, like you said, it's a good problem to have these teams in the Central really bubbling up to the top, because even if they do falter at the end, it's going to be that rising tide that raises all the ships and forces these teams that may be a bit stagnant or kind of not looking at their business model the right way in terms of, and we're going to just sit here and pick on Toronto, like not trying to work within their farm system and be like, hey, we may be able to look in here and get a guy to do a job instead of having to trade like
Yeah,
3 prospects for a guy that we can cross our fingers and hope for the best. Let's just put a little bit of faith in our scouts that, like, hey, this guy who's in AAA may be able to get the job done. You could go and reach down there and
yeah,
let's just pull it up for posterity's sake. You could, because yeah, they got, and this is a guy that I only know because I got a couple cards of him, and people are, but at the time we're kind of really over the moon about him, like Orioles Martinez. You can get a guy that you could plug into a couple different positions where you have guys with versatility like Bo Bichette, where it's like, oh, this guy's potentially crushing it, but he is more comfortable here. If you have that flexibility where you could move a guy to accommodate a hot hitter in the minors coming up, that just makes your team that much more dangerous.
right.
And I'm just hoping for like Toronto's sake, because that outside of their NBA title, like 5 years ago at this point, they haven't had much to really cheer about
No, no.
since I was about 10.
um, But before we talk about the Guardians, I do have a question. Out of those four teams, uh, which do you think is going to be the team that comes back to earth?
To be fair, I think it's probably gonna be my pick. It's probably gonna be the
When
Twins because they're just on a heater right now,
hmm
and early season heaters are nice and they do good things, but they usually burn out pretty badly, and it usually ends up with a couple guys on the injured list. And they're kind of already a team that is playing with house money in terms of just what they're getting from their oh, of course. I click on the Twins and it doesn't load. All right. Cuz yeah, it's a lineup that just you look at it and you're going that's a team that's won 10 in a row. And but then you go down to the pitching staff and you're like, okay, I could see where there's some upside here, but there's also some really rough games on these
yeah,
guys' logs.
yeah,
Like Joe Ryan is obviously the and
right,
him and Pablo Lopez are kind of like 1 and 1A. You put them in whatever order you want, but surrounding them is a absolute wild card in Bailey Ober, a guy that I think could completely implode at any time. He'll have games where he looks amazing, and the because his big thing is he's not gonna like overpower you,
hmm
but he's going to like pound the strike zone enough to just make his defense like kind of pick him up.
hmm
But that hasn't really translated to him giving up a ton of home runs this year, which could flip on a dime, really,
yeah,
if you're a guy that is in the strike zone as much as he is.
hmm
Like the kid Simeon Woods Richardson, the one they got from Toronto
yeah,
in the Barrios
a very,
deal.
yeah,
He he's looks good so far, but it's in short supply, and he's averaging less than 5 innings a start, which
yeah,
is not great. Yeah,
right.
there's only so much you can rely on your bullpen for, where you got a lot of guys already getting a lot of work. I think if the wheels are going to fall off on any teams, it's going to be Minnesota.
So yeah, I agree. My pick was going to be Minnesota too. Um, especially if this division continues to be as competitive as it is so far. Um, if Minnesota can't, you know, click on all cylinders uh, after whenever this 10-game winning streak ends, um, and find themselves in tough, spots with going against their own division or other teams that that are better than them, and I think there's a lot of teams that are better than them. Um, it's going to be a rough patch for them. So I think Minnesota. You're right about that one.
Yeah, but we'll get to the so the team that we're going to highlight in this division that is kind of could be that next Baltimore is it's going to be Detroit
Yeah,
because they are a team where they have really despite some of their acquisitions like Eduardo Rodriguez leaving and stuff like that, they they have I think a decent mix of youth and experience. They have, even though he's kind of not getting off to the hottest of start. Spencer Torkelson, who is a guy that I think is going to be really good in this league for a long time. Colt Keith is another guy who is like a top 20 prospect in the sport.
Yep.
Yeah, everybody loves Riley Green, his mixture of speed and power and plate discipline. There's probably going to be a point where he is their leadoff guy. But more importantly, they're pitching. Tarek Skubal is an absolute fucking star. Casey Mize, I think, once he is completely healthy again, is a perfect Robin to Skubal's Batman. They
Yep.
have taken Jack Flaherty off the scrap heap. He's not playing out of his mind, but he's not
hurting them either.
completely. That's the thing. I think that's huge. The fact that he is keeping them in games.
Yep.
Where a couple years ago he was pitching both the Cardinals and to a certain extent last year the Orioles out of games because he just couldn't get out of his own head. And he had tons of walk problems. He's striking out guys at a massive clip this year. And I think all that stuff will kind of work itself out record wise.
And
their bullpen is
I was just gonna say
disgusting.
their bullpen is filthy. Like
Yeah.
like maybe in terms of quality pitching out of that pen, in terms of ERA, it's disgusting how good they are.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a baseball fan, you know that if you have a great bullpen, it can make or break a season.
Yeah, and they built both of these parts of their team through both the draft and shrewd free agency moves.
Yeah.
So that's
I mean, I would say I don't know if this Tigers team would have signed Javi Baez today. This particular year.
no, I think they kind of jumped the shark a bit on him. They
and then I think unless they can find a buyer for him, which they found a buyer for Erod, if they can buy a buyer for him, maybe get a couple of prospects, get some money off the table, possibly. But I
I
think
don't think
maybe
it's that as optimistic as I want to be. I don't see them escaping that one. But to their credit, they have a bunch of guys at his position, including the aforementioned Colt Keith, who could move to short in a pinch. And they have guys that they are grooming down on the farm to just take that spot away when the time comes to get
I mean,
get him out of there.
Yeah, he is an outlier in this lineup. It's been really painful to watch his career in Detroit, considering when he's coming from Chicago.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's a big thing more than anything is just trying to I don't know mitigate your bad both contracts and circumstances.
Yeah,
because they were able to kind of ride out the storm. And Eduardo Rodriguez wasn't a bad player for them, but it was a guy that I think did not.
Well, he wasn't healthy the first year he went.
And he didn't give them value for the money.
But last year, if I remember, he was an all-star type player, wasn't he? He was doing very well for them, wasn't he? Yeah. So, and what did they get from him?
13-9, 3.3 ERA.
What did they get for him from Arizona?
No, he left as a free agent.
Oh, that's right. He opted out. You're right. You're right. He opted out. But yeah. So why are we bringing up Detroit? Well, I think you and I have thought that out of the three teams we're gonna mention, um, and what's the other? We think the other team that we're gonna mention is further along than Detroit. I think that for me personally, I think Detroit has the best shot of being the next Orioles. Uh, maybe even sooner than 5, maybe 3 years down the line. What do you think?
Yeah, because they got those two kind of potential cornerstones in Green Torkelson, and they got two pitchers that you can really mold the staff around in Mize and Scooble.
And they got
And
to
like
keep
we
that
just said,
bullpen together.
yeah, and that's always going to be a wild card in baseball at
Right.
the stage age. The bullpens, it's always going to be that bit of fluctuation.
Yeah.
But the fact that they have found this group of guys, both inexperienced, experienced, former starters, young guys that have kind of championship pedigree coming in and kind of just putting that together and everything kind of clicking the way it is.
Hmm.
You gotta ride it out for now because there's not the there's always that chance that it falls apart next year and you kind of have to build that from scratch.
Yeah.
But if you have enough pieces where if there are parts of the system that falter, you can kind of
Put
just
it together.
instead of having to rebuild, you can kind of just retool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so what do you think about them being close, or do you think they're still a little bit of weight off?
No, I think they need to go make their Corbin Burns trade. They
Yeah.
need to go get either another hitter or another pitcher that kind of pushes them over the edge because as it stands right now, they have a lot of guys that are not particularly playing up to their level, but it may just be due to like a lack of protection
Yeah.
because when you have Javi Baez hitting in the middle of your order and being below the Mendoza line, and you got Gio Urshela who is already hurt and hasn't hit a home run.
Well, that's a
You
good point because I guess what you're saying is their Corbin Burns has to be a hitter.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
They because I don't think you're going to get either of those guys off the books.
No.
So you have to kind of like you can't get rid of any your big guys, but if you can turn some of the pitchers that you have because you have a lot of not necessarily expendable pitchers, but if you could like turn guy like Ty Madden and Cater Montero, guys that are kind of on that cusp, those guys that are probably major league ready if they were in a circumstance where they could be just everyday rotation guys, and you could find a team that really wanted to offload a hitter, you could make that move. But I'm not certain that Detroit is aware of
Yeah.
kind of how close they are because I still it still rings to me of a team where like they feel like they're in transition and
Yeah.
they recognize that they have those two burdensome contracts and instead of going well we can kind of work around it, we have a really deep farm system where we can go turn some of these guys that have a lot of promise into just one guy that could be the the old hump pusher, if you will.
Yeah.
And if they kind of hold steady and be like, well, maybe these guys are taking over for like an aging Kenta Maeda next year. I hope for Detroit's sake they're not that short-sighted.
Yeah, I think that they need to, if this is a year where they think that I guess the word would be overachieve, because they probably didn't expect to be where they are, you know? Um, and let's say they miss the playoffs by 1 or 2 games. Let's say they make it, or they completely fall off the map. Who knows? But let's say they make the playoffs, or they miss it by 1 or 2 games. Um, I think that should be the message to the front office that, oh, we really are this close. Let's see who we can see, or who we can get to come help this team out. Who's
Yeah,
available? But at the same time, we need to be cautious about who we're giving money to. Because
yeah,
if you just go in with the mindset of, oh my God, we made the playoffs, and not think we overachieved, that's how you get a Javi Baez situation.
yeah. That you have to make that realization that you're not the Dodgers, you're not the
Yeah.
Yankees,
Yep.
you're not Texas. You if you give a bad $150 million contract out, it will put a stink on you.
Yeah.
The way Javi Baez is. Yeah, I agree with you. They
So
they need to kind of really focus in on their needs and then uh,
go from there.
go from there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Whether it be in a trade or whether it be through free agency.
Right. Right. Hey, it would be interesting to see if they make any kind of trades at the deadline if they're in it. Because then you kind of get a direction of what the front office is thinking.
Yeah, and it's yeah. I don't and that's kind of like the great unknown right now with them is
Yeah.
you haven't seen enough from that front office to kind of know what gauge their thermometer of the season of like how high do we need to be to like not accept an offer for this guy
Right.
or in what position do we need to be to go all right we can move these top 10 prospects and go get somebody and not feel as if we're uh shortchanging our future by putting a potential back end of the rotation guy on the block for maybe a rental or maybe
Yeah.
a guy that is just a reclamation project.
And also at the other end of that, if the team goes south this year and they don't end up where they want to be, it's okay because they're in a rebuilding stage. They have a good team. Don't hit the panic button this year. If just because
Yeah.
you're 18 and 13 in May and you end up, you know, uh, 65 and whatever in September, it's okay because you have a good team. You did not expect to be where you were in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, you got to look at the pockets of quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes these teams panic and they say, well, we were good at the beginning of the season. If we got to get better players, let's just blow this team up and get more guys in. And you have to be okay with failing because the ultimate goal is 3 years from now, not this year.
And if we're going to talk about blowing it up, we have to go to the NL East where you have teams that regularly just decide to fall on the grenade. And you have Atlanta and Philly at the top of the division. And I think we would all agree that they're kind of going to be there for the foreseeable future. But
Yeah.
from there, you have Uncle Steve and the Mets, who kind of went ham on the free agency train, and then they subsequently traded the vast majority of those guys away. You had Washington, who was a World Series winner, and then just absolutely set everything on fire. And then you have the Marlins, who are just the epitome of
Awful.
when it gets too good, you gotta getting.
Yeah.
They are three teams that I think you could look at with various lenses of there's stuff to look at with positivity, but there's also things that you know that they can't help themselves. So
Yeah.
I'll split the difference, and I'll explain what I'm saying. Whereas like the Mets, I think if like we are saying, Detroit needs to kind of avoid that. Let's not throw a ton of prospects and money at a guy if we're within like 2 games. Kind of let it run its course. If it's meant to be this year, and if you are ready to take that step, kind of let it happen organically. I don't think the Mets have that in them.
No.
And I think the Marlins, after somehow uh, making the playoffs despite being with a minus run differential, they're a team that I think is just never going to not pull the rug out under from their manager and their players,
Yeah.
which I think is a shame because
Yeah.
you're in a market that has granted it's not a great baseball town. It's a big college football town. It's a fairly decent basketball town, and it's kind of soured as a professional football town over the past probably decade. But it's one of those things where you kind of if you don't give your fan base uh, any reason to have hope, you can't be mad at them for not having it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the Marlins, despite their couple of World Series, have always been. Uh, they were NFT rug pullers before being an NFT rug puller was cool. They they always went all in to immediately just take their chips to the to the cash out station afterwards. They so that and that leaves us with Washington in the middle, who I think have endured some really dog shit seasons, but there's seemingly a bit of an upswing up there. If what do you think about the Nationals?
Well, the Nationals winning the World Series to me is such a forgettable word. It's like when people look back and go, "Wait, the New Orleans Saints won a World Super Bowl?" That's what the Nationals feel like. They won the random World Series, which, ironically enough, was in the middle of the Astros dynasty run. They beat them and
Yeah,
won the World Series. And, they're a team. What? Okay, perfect example of what I said that the Tigers should not do. What the Nationals did was they thought that they were good, and then just started throwing money at these guys, hoping that they would be the next dynasty. And what happened? Anthony Rendon couldn't stay healthy, and Max Scherzer couldn't stay healthy. So then they get rid of them both, and now they're just kind of been. I wouldn't even say keeping their head above water because they've been as bad as the Marlins, if not worse, the last few years.
yeah, but I think what Washington has done better than the Mets and the Marlins is they've now realized that if they're going to trade a star or if they're going to let a star go, they're going to go get something for him. They're not going to let a guy like Rendon walk again.
Right.
So when they traded Juan Soto, They got back Mackenzie Gore,
Yep.
who I think is going to be their ace, if not by the end of this year, for years going forward. And CJ Abrams, who is a guy that is I'd say a decent candidate to be a 30-30 guy. It's there's if you look at their lineup, it's not something that right now you're going, oh, they're world beaters, but there's things in place where, like Baltimore, if they hit on a couple draft picks in like the next couple years, they're gonna be there. Because if you look at what they've done the past couple seasons in the draft and the guys that they have in their top 30 prospects right now, Dylan Cruz is gonna be in the majors within, like, I'd say a year. James Woods is going to be in the majors by the end of this year. So that's 2-year outfield spots locked up right there. I think Lane Thomas, when he comes back from his injury, is going to figure it out. He was an absolute monster last year, the kid they got from the Cardinals.
Yep.
They have so much promise hitting, and the pitching is something where, and we can, if you want to go back through the archives and look at my pick for rookie of the year last of Kay Cavalli, that kind of did not go to plan, but he's another guy that can just fucking throw heat. He's 25. He's ready. He's just got to stay healthy. And yeah, they have so many guys that you could plug into this team right now, and they're like top 15 prospects, and that makes so many things expendable where you can go get stars.
So my only thing about the Nationals is, unlike the Tigers, where everybody in that division is kind of on even playing ground. Do you think that maybe the National, maybe the ladder too big because of Philly and Atlanta, or do you think that eventually they can compete with them?
I think it's going to be kind of like an iron sharpens iron thing, where they eventually are going to kind of reach that point where they can go. It's kind of going to be what the AL East was for a while, where you had
Okay.
3 teams just beating the snot out of each other, and it kind of like made them all ready for the postseason.
Yeah.
And whatever 3 of those were, you didn't want to face them in the first round.
Right.
And granted, sometimes those teams like fell flat, like Toronto, Tampa had a couple of bad exits, but they were always there. They were kind of omnipresent. And
Yeah.
if Washington can, in the current, especially in the current playoff structure, if they can work themselves way back up to relevancy, I think that becomes a destination where
Well,
you can kind of like convince guys to be like, yo, we can go toe to toe with these guys, and if we can beat them in the regular season, come the playoffs, we can beat them again.
well, one of the things they need to do is get off the Patrick Corbin train. He has overstayed his welcome there. Like, it's time to move on for him.
I think, but he's on
I know.
the Javi Baez.
I know.
Like,
I know.
his contract is too much of a poison pill for anybody to swallow.
I do want to ask about what your opinions are on Josiah Gray. Now that he's had a few years with the National, uh, how was he viewed in the Dodgers system, and what do you think about that?
Granted, he's in his mid-20s, so I don't think it's something where you want to like write him off just yet.
Mm,
But he's one of those ones where when there was all those trade talks with him and like Dustin May, it's like which one do you want to keep? And I was always a big proponent of like Josiah Gray because he was a guy that I thought always had more promise. He was just kind of that guy that had a bit more grit. But now he seems to get hurt a lot. He doesn't seem to be able to harness what power that he has.
mhm.
And did I just
I think we
fall out?
Yeah, I think you froze.
Oh, I must. Yeah, hold on.
Technical difficulties.
Am I back yet?
Nope. Black screen.
Ah. All right. But can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. That doesn't matter. Nobody needs to see me at this stage of the game. Yeah, I can just be this. I can be the darkness. I'm Batman. But yeah, I think with Josiah Gray, it's kind of he's run his course.
Yeah.
I think it's something where I don't really foresee him being a useful part of a winning team.
Yeah, I mean, that just goes to
In
show,
any,
you know,
yeah,
when you're the cornerstone of a trade, sometimes it doesn't work out the way that they want. Although I think that the Nationals were just happy to get uh Scherzer's contract out of there.
yeah. He's definitely a guy that you're like, man. And I think you make a great point with that. Like you don't want a big trade that you made to just have nobody on the other end of it
Yeah.
because that kind of just sucks. Where you're like, oh, we traded this huge part of our franchise, and all we have to show for it is this guy with a 14 ERA.
But
that
it happened more often than it doesn't.
yeah, it does, and that's yeah. That, let's just hope for the sake of my argument that it's not the end of Josiah Gray. I want to be wrong in thinking that he's cooked.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. And on that note, because I'm having an issue getting my camera back, so we're gonna go into the latter stages of this telecast. Uh, the final region of the sport that we want to look at in terms of teams that could kind of turn it around is in my head the NL West because we saw what Arizona did last year in their run to the World Series, and you have a lot of talent in that division.
Hmm.
So our biggest dark horse of the three teams, Detroit, Washington. What can the Colorado Rockies do to bring back everybody's least favorite Dane Cook ism, Rocktober?
um. Well, I can tell you that when we were looking at the top prospects a little bit ago, they have the most in the top 100. So there's something. But they, out of the three teams, they have the most uphill battle.
Yeah, because they have the best teams and the most, I'd say, best, I'd say most fervid front offices ahead of them. Yeah. They have the the most teams that want to uh, stay relevant for the longest. Yeah,
I
you
just,
have yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look. We joked about it. We were gonna make fun of the White Sox. And the White Sox are a laughing stock, but the Colorado Rockies, like, what is their game plan here? Like, it just does not seem like they have a formula to compete, especially in that division. Never mind the NL. Like the West with all those teams, uh, you know, is their pitching gonna get better? Are they gonna get enough hitters in there? You still got 28,000-year-old Charlie Blackman on the team. It's just it's just not a good situation there.
Yeah, and that's why they're kind of the
The dark
the ones
horse.
where you have to uh, instill the most belief because you just go, yeah, all right, you have tons of top 100 prospects. You have them at a lot of different positions.
Yeah,
You got uh, Adiel Amador, you can play anywhere up the middle. You have your three big outfield prospects. You got Drew Romo, who is a top 10 pick at catcher. You got tons of pitching, both left and right handed, that you could throw into both the bullpen and the starting rotation. So there's lots of stuff to uh, be positive about, but in the end, it's always Colorado. So any of those pitching guys that you think could be stars, all you gotta look is at the Kyle Freelands of the world of, oh no, he was great one year and then just became an absolute shell of himself not 18 months later.
yeah.
And Daniel Bard, who was like a revelation, is now he can't pitch his way out of a paper bag on many nights. And it's not something that you look at the roster and you're going, oh, there's things there now that I can be happy about. It's just
But at
yeah.
the same time, like, so you trade Nolan Arenado and you get Austin Gomber back. Like, I
Yeah.
remember when that happened, uh, and we
We
had
killed it. Yeah.
we had talked about it when it happened, and it's like, because the speculation was the Rockies are gonna trade Nolan, they're gonna trade him, they're gonna trade him. Who's gonna get him? The Dodgers. Who's gonna get him? Yankees, Mets. And then he goes to the Cardinals, which I didn't see coming. I don't remember if you did or not. But
Yeah, I didn't.
but they didn't get anybody worth him out of that. They got a I, I don't even know if calling Austin Gamba mediocre is the right word, but he's not great, and that's what you're gonna trade your superstar for. So I mean, if that's the direction that they're gonna do when trading star players, how are they gonna build this farm system up and develop guys that are ready to come up and win?
Yeah, and that's always going to be the big thing with Colorado is what can you uh, get pitching wise.
Yeah.
But also, if you are going to move on from these guys, because I think there's little to no shot that they're ever going to move Chris Bryant's money.
Nope.
That is just absolute dead weight. But when Charlie Blackman comes off the books, when Ryan McMahon potentially one day comes off the books, despite the fact that he's probably having the best start to a season that he's had in a Rockies jersey.
Yeah.
There's lots of movement that you could do with this team to kind of free up spaces for the youngsters in a way that Baltimore did. But you have to just be committed to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is something that I'm not sure Colorado, despite the fact that they're in it, and that's why I use Baltimore as the perfect example, because you look at the AL East, that is a division that is just for killers. You always have the Yankees are going to be there. You always have the Red Sox, even in their bad years, there's going to be that bounce back that comes.
Right.
Despite everything that we've talked about. Toronto is going to, in this regime, at least try to spend their way into relevancy. And Tampa is kind of just, baseball herpes. Like you think they're gone, but they're really not.
Yeah.
And Baltimore has worked their way from a 45-win team to being at the top of that heap, which is wild.
Which is a whole discussion is who's going to be that team to do it. And I think, putting Detroit aside, if you're just focusing on the two, I think Washington had a better shot at doing it than Colorado.
Yeah, and Colorado has I think the same uphill climb that Baltimore had, where they're going to have them lumps and they're going to have to draft well. But I agree with you. Of the three teams, Washington is the one I think is the most poised with both the players they've drafted, the trades they've made, and their commitment to kind of staying the course. Yeah. Where they're not really just, we had a bad season, we're just gonna blow it up and try again with newer, younger players. Yep. They're like, hey, these guys, all right. Because you look at CJ Abrams from when he came over, like he did not have glowing statistics.
No.
In his early run with the Nationals, but they kind of stuck with him because they saw the talent that was there, and they knew that if they gave these guys time to gel, that there would be something there in the end. Yeah. And as you pointed out, once they get out from under Patrick Corbin's contract, and once they're able to kind of have Steven Strasburg's just ghost of Christmas past money out of their system,
and maybe find a way to change Josiah Gray, improve and work on him a little better.
Yeah, if it's something, if it's something where you can get a pitching coach in to kind of
reinvent.
Yeah, get him out of his own head.
Yeah,
I think that would be huge.
Yeah.
I think of all the teams that we've talked about, Washington is despite Atlanta and Philadelphia being the juggernauts they are, in terms of like staying power. Because I think with the way both those rosters are constituted and the amount of youth experience and star power that those two have, Washington is going to have to really go through the draft and have like 2 more years where they kind of hit on their first 2-round picks.
Yep.
And then have those guys come up in 2 years. And now we got ourselves a real hydra at the top of the AL East.
Yeah,
much to the chagrin of Mets fans. I'd love to make it a 4-horse race, but I just don't see where your pitching's coming unless you overpay.
Well, they've done that, and that
Yeah,
didn't work.
and it
So
it blew up in their face. So
maybe don't overpay for pitchers that are at the end of their career. So, but no, I agree with you. I do like Washington. I'm not giving up on Detroit though. I still think Detroit is right there. Um, and we'll see about Colorado. I think it's going to be a lot of dark years for the Rockies before they can be relevant again.
yeah. So with all that being said, if you're running across this video, leave in the comments who you think out of our picks, or maybe it's somebody that we didn't pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just don't put Royals lol. Just put a sentence like why you think a team is going to be the next Orioles, and just come back to us next week where we'll have a potentially just as positive spin on Rob Manfred's least favorite sport. This has been Opposite Field, episode 63. Colin, a pleasure as always, brother.
Yep.
And we'll talk to y'all next week.
Later.